We are live with the top 4 Lunar Phase stuff. This is my first time streaming on YouTube, so hopefully everything's set up right. We'll see. Yeah. So I've delayed this stream. Seems quite delayed, but I'll make do with it. I'm not good at this. Okay. So welcome in, everyone. So this is more like a sort of like a Professor Swolak style stream where I'm just gonna have a slideshow built and I'm gonna go over the deck list and talk about some of the theory behind it as well as some other things. Afterwards, I do have some goodies that are I'll probably unbox it on stream later after the stream or after the yapping. So yeah. In case you don't know, I got top 4 in the Premier Event this past weekend. With foxes. So we have lunar phases as well. So this is a deck that, you know, it was really hyped at the beginning of Moonrise, but it did barely anything through any of the premieres throughout Moonrise. So this is the first top of it's gotten, and it's a top 4. So let's guess if we can just start with the stream. So just like Swolax, we're gonna start with who am I? Thank you for the congratulations. Welcome into. So I'm Bo, also known as Q is Too Short. I am a 2-time Elestrals champion, including the Dallas Open 2025. The trophy is right behind me. And I topped with some weird decks. A lot of decks that nobody else has really played to as much success as I have. Even before I've started playing those, a lot of these are my own brews, like photosynthesis, the solar artifacts, and then most recently the foxes, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So that's a little bit about me. So the next question that should be answered is why? Why do this? Welcome in, Adam. Why not? This is a deck that is like I fully expected to just kind of just have fun with this event. After like I decided to pilot this deck before the World's qualification process was announced, and despite that, I still decided to pilot this deck because I am confident enough in myself to be able to perform enough to be able to qualify for Worlds anyways. But considering I got top 4, I'm already way ahead of the curve for it. Welcome in, everyone. Welcome. So this is a fan favorite archetype. Like, K-Cray is one of the biggest fans of foxes. There's a lot of other people that are fans of the foxes. kind of wanted to put on a show, and hopefully I did. Hopefully I was entertaining for you all. And for this archetype, like, it was hyped at the beginning of Moonrise. It was going to be a big part of what Moonrise is, and it not performing at all in Premier events kind of was a bit of a shame. So that's kind of why I want to bring it, is to show that there is potential here. Is it a great deck? Not really, but it did well enough. And this is the last good opportunity, I feel, for this deck to do something. With Firestorm coming out for the next premiere, so it's going to be legal for the next premiere. This deck does get better, like a lot of the other decks in the format do, where they start playing Champ like a Void. The problem with playing Champ like a Void in this deck is that like a Void takes on a different role than in other decks that use it as more of an aggressive beater. And you really do want to be able to play your Werepups from your hand unsuppressed, because the search from them is quite valuable. So until Lunar Phase gets more dedicated support, I don't anticipate this deck being as successful as it was this past weekend. So let's go over the deck profile. I'm gonna do this using my webcam instead of the slideshow, but we'll go over main, spirit, and the side deck, and kind of just go over it. We'll go more in depth about choices on ratios and what options I decided to put into this throughout the presentation. So starting off first with the main deck. Of course, we're on Lunar Phase, so playing anything but a 3 Voldusk would be a mistake, and anything but 3 Werepup would also be a mistake. These two Elestrals are the dedicated support for the Lunar Phases. And these are really what make the deck work. I'll go over this more, but the Lunar Phases themselves don't do too much. So being able to select which Lunar Phase you want specifically, as well as amplifying their effects, is really important. And then the final Elestral I'm playing is 3 Astrap. This is just like Astrap, it's good, but it's particularly good in this deck. Similar to Werepup, where you're able to select what you need. It's really important so that you don't end up drawing into things that are going to be consistent. You're not going to have a bad string of draws consistently if you have Rabbit. It's also a 5 defense, so it pairs very nicely alongside your Voldusk, in that they're able to also be part of the wall. With Werepup, 3-2 stat line is just not enough to be able to hold this wall. So Astrap works very well because of its 5 defense, working very nicely with the Voldusk. It's also a great card to like beat normal casts or your normal action for your turn, because if you have Voldusk on field, you're probably not going to have too many other normal casts to make. That's all of the 1-drops, so that makes a total of 9. And so we're on 2 Ascensions, our Like a Void and our Vulcans. As I mentioned before, Like a Void takes on a different role than Like a Void in other decks. I'll get to this more when we go over Like a Void, but this plays very differently, and there's a reason, and that's part of the reason why I have decided to only opt for 1. Bull Clips is the highest end this deck gets to, and for its effect, of course, we are playing all 8 Lunar Phases. This is a very potent card. It has a game-winning effect, even if it doesn't resolve. Like, oftentimes, forcing out of Gorgons is enough to just put you even more ahead and make sure that your opponent can't out the Bull Clips. And realistically, you could get into a position where you can activate this multiple times for it. It's not common. I haven't been able to do it. Now, onto our Lunar Phases. We are on a singleton copy of Full Moon. As I mentioned, like a Void takes on a different role, so having a Full Moon access isn't as potent. I know that Coder posted a deck profile that used Full Moon to its biggest or most potential. This deck doesn't really do that. So Full Moon really doesn't have too many good synergies within the deck to justify playing it more than one copy. Another Lunar Phase most people are familiar with is 3 New Moon. This is the Earthquake replacement of the deck. We are not on Earthquake or resting within the 55 cards it can be. So it's not in main, it's not inside. So this is our only dedicated removal. And for a Lunar Phase deck, this is generally better because this also procs your Voldos effects. It's searchable off of Werepup. It's one of the 8 Lunar Phases you need for Bull Clips. It also matches a little nicer with the Spirit Math and Earthquake does, even though Spirit Math in this deck is pretty comfy. Final Lunar Phase people are familiar with is Waxing Gibbous. This is the counter rune that allows you to change positions of an Elestral, and it's decent enough. In this deck, you can't count on your opponent always having Lunar Enchanted Elestrals to be able to do this on their Elestrals, but being able to switch Voldos back to defense after, let's say, an Eddy switches it, or switching it to attack after Galaxer swaps its stats, can be very strong. This is like a pseudo tsunami in that sense. But it also procs your Voldos effects. Getting on to more niche Lunar Phases, 3 Waning Crescent. This is the Lunar Phase that allows you to heal when it's cast, and I'll go over this more when we go over each individual Lunar Phase, but this is by far the best Lunar Phase to play when you're just cycling with Voldos. Mainly because this allows you to go Spirit Positive as well as card or hand size neutral when you have a single Voldos on you. Without Voldos, it's kind of mediocre. Next up, 3 Waning Gibbous. This is the Lunar Phase that allows you to return Lunar Phase from your Underworld or hand to your deck to search for another Voldos. So this is sort of like not our 10, 11, 12 of 1-drops in this deck. It feels really bad if this is your first one. This gets your first 1-drop of the entire game, but sometimes it's necessary. But seeing Voldos is very important. It also has some very cool shenanigans because it returns Lunar Phases from your Underworld to your deck. That recursion can be very powerful. 2 First Quarter. This is counter rune that allows you to draw a card. It's okay. Yeah, it's just okay. A lot of the people, when they build Lunar Phase, will tend to triple up on this one. I don't really like that, personally. A single Final Quarter. This is the one that allows you to send 2 Lunar Phases from your deck and send them to your Underworld. This is one of the weakest Lunar Phases because it requires specific synergies to be set up. Well, it sets up certain synergies like Bull Clips and the next Lunar Phase, but overall it's mostly a do-nothing card a lot of the time. But we do have to kind of run it for Bull Clips, and it does not have a bad discard effect. And then the final Lunar Phase is 2 Waxing Crescent. This is the Battle Trick, and it's the only one that also costs 2 Luna instead of 1. This is a very powerful card for its cost. I think it's really strong. It just feels really bad to open with because it gives like 1 or 2 attack at most. It does suck that it also doesn't give defense, so it can't blink a Zeus. But this card's pretty strong, in my opinion. The cost is perfectly fine for this. So, on to more generic stuff. 3 Ambrosia. This deck is surprisingly expensive. And this is... The Ambrosia is just good. Like, sometimes you just need more Lunars. This can get you back with Lunars. Sometimes you need Waters or Thunders for Rabbits or Tsunamis. This can get back those. Great card. And then Counterance. 3 Gorgons, 3 Shield, 3 Tsunami. These are the best counterrunes for playing defensively. This deck really does want to play defensively, so it's pretty simple to play the cards that are best defensively. There's some other cards that you could play here, but I don't think they would be as strong. Spirit deck. We believe it is 11 Lunar, so Elestrals compliant. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 11. So Elestrals compliant Spirit deck. We have 3 Water, 3 Zaptor, 2 Fire, and a Frost. 3 Water makes it very comfy for your Tsunamis. 3 Zaptor makes it very comfy for your Astrabbits. These cards... Well, I can talk about the Flurmine right now. This is not for Cryoblast. Well, your own Cryoblast at least. We are not playing Cryoblast in the side deck at all. Not even, or in the main deck, for that matter. But this is purely to misenchant or enchant onto Like a Void to make it immune to Cryoblast. Being able to hold on to that 6 stat line is very powerful, especially when you want to play defensively. You want to keep your Elestrals on field as long as possible. So being able to play around the 1-cost Invoke that does destroy it is really important. If your opponent is forced to use Earthquake at that point, that's fine, because that is a 1-of in their deck. And chances are Resting is going to be used on a different Elestral than your Like Void. Fire Spirits are fun. We'll get into that because of side deck shenanigans. So, starting off with the side deck, we have 10 good Elestrals. So, Spectaris, Nabi, and Doppelgate. And it, so this is to all side in all at once. And that's simply because some games, or into some matchups, you cannot bunker with this deck. So this is really just to smokescreen into Lunar aggro as much as possible. These were very nice to me throughout the tournament whenever I sided them in. Being able to get Doppelgater out and Like a Void out simultaneously is just so devastating. And although we don't have the Hurricanes or Zeuses to help Nabi, the Lunar Phases supplement the deck well, Lunar aggro well enough to be used in a smokescreen. And then our option for decks like Blistrix or Eruption. Theory behind this is that you can blink enough turns to be able to draw enough for your deck to be able to find enough Eruptions to finish out the game. Yeah, it's it's a tall order to ask, especially since none of your other guys really do anything into anything big. So you're just really banking on being able to draw these before you die. Would I say it was good? No, but you're kind of already losing that matchup anyway, so. So that's the entire deck list. So all 15 cards inside, all 20 spirit deck, and the 40 card main. So let's go over the lunar phases. So the lunar phases themselves are each individually weaker. When you look at Waning Crescent, for instance, it's objectively worse Ambro. New Moon is objectively worse Earthquake. That kind of thing. But they are amplified through their synergies. And each one is situationally strong. And when we go over through these, I try to take the ones whose situations are more likely to occur and put more of those in my deck. The outliers to that are going to be cards that are super potent in their specific situation. Cards like New Moon and Waxing Crescent, for instance. Their situations are hard to come by, but in those situations, they are the best, even compared to other cards' generic staples. Voldas themselves can be seen as refunding part of the cost of playing that card. Whether that be the spirit that you use for that lunar phase, or the card itself in your hand. So if you have 5 cards in hand, play a lunar phase, you can refund the cost of the actual card from your hand and get a 5th card back into your hand. Whereas having 2 or 3 of them on the field can be seen as really amplifying the effects of those cards. So that instead of just healing 2, you're healing 5 or healing 2 and drawing 3, for instance. So let's start off with the most common lunar phase. Lunar phase Full Moon. This one is a counter rune that allows you to enchant 2 lunar to your field. And when it's discarded, you get to foretell. This is strong when played to ascend Werewolf into Like a Void. Specifically to destroy a threat. This deck really aims to destroy, like, it controls, but it destroys without having your opponent have an opportunity to really respond. Things like Full Moon or New Moon and Like a Void are both very strong and don't really give your opponent very good opportunities to act with counter runes. The enchant effect can be useful. Sometimes you just need more spirits onto something in order to play into Volclips or to meet the activation criteria for another lunar phase. Specifically Waxing Gibbous and Waxing Crescent, because those both need to target a lunar enchanted Elestral. And Full Moon happens to achieve that criteria. It's not the best effect because the actual enchant effect isn't that great because of it requires those situations where you're trying to get into Volclips or activate another lunar phase. Generally, you will enchant at least 1 to the Werepup that you're trying to ascend to. That way you get a Frost Spirit under that Like a Void and have it privately enchanted when you go in to destroy something. It also gets in for a little bit more chip damage. It's okay to have, or to activate, when you're intending to hard ascend. like I said, Lack of Void is basically a destruction rune in this deck, so giving that counter immunity is really important. Hello, Words. I haven't really been looking at chat that much, so I don't know when you got in, but hello, welcome in. This is one of the lunar phases that does not really require Voldas to be strong, because it is strong when Werepup is on field. So yes, Voldas can be good to amplify its effect, but it's not necessary, because you really want it to be able to get into Lack of Void for Doctor. The discard effect is near useless. Being able to look at, like, the intention behind this is to stack your deck for your next Voldas draws. The problem is that drawing 3 cards deep is not very hard in this deck. You can get within 1 or 2 turns pretty easily. So being able to choose like the 3rd card from the top of your deck to draw first doesn't matter when you're drawing that 3rd card within the next turn anyways. So this is the weakest discard effect that the Lunar Phases have. The next Lunar Phase that most people know is New Moon. This is invoke rune that allows you to target an Elestral and suppress it until the end phase, and then you may expend Lunar equal to its enchantment cost, and then discard a Lunar Phase to destroy it. This is strong when another Lunar Phase is in hand. Being able to destroy an opponent's Celestial, as well as sometimes dodging floating effects like Calf Mail, is pretty good. But it does require that extra discard to be able to be used. Voldusk is recommended with this one because of how expensive it is. You are spending at least 2 spirits and at least 2 cards from your hand to be able to pull off this effect. So Voldusk helps you refund part of that. It's not necessary, especially when there is a massive threat on the field, but I would usually try to have Voldusk on field if possible. You can also be more liberal with the Voldusk, or with the New Moon, if you have Voldusk on your field, especially multiple, and then, or you can play what I call aggro control. I'll go more over this after we go over the lunar phases, but aggro control is essentially you being able to clear your opponent's board in order to get in with chip damage with your Voldusk, Ash Rabbits, or Werepups. Being able to get in for chip damage is very strong in this deck because you are not only having your opponent burn themselves to try to beat your board, but you're then burning your opponent more by punishing them for not having enough on their board. Hello, Sam. Welcome in. Thank you for the congratulations. Wax and Gibbets. This is another known lunar phase where you can change the position of a lunar Elestral. It also has a second effect that is okay. You get to expend lunar and discard a lunar phase to stop it from being destroyed by card effects once for that turn. It is strong to protect your Voldusk or Like a Void from battle specifically. This card, using it for its secondary effect is kind of weak, but being able to shift Voldusk to defense position or switching Like a Voids back to attack is very powerful. It can change the battle position of your opponent's Elestrals, but I wouldn't always count on it. Sometimes it is the better option to switch your opponent's Elestrals to defense, but we aren't playing very many aggressive guys, so being able to take advantage of like 2 defense Spectaris is kind of rare. This, like as I mentioned, the secondary effect is neat. But you really have to have an additional Lunar Phase in hand and an additional counter rune to offset the position change to really make this card worth it. Being able to dodge things like PTA or Earthquake can be useful sometimes, but it doesn't really help if your guy is stuck in the wrong position and your opponent can just beat over it through battle. It is also an expensive effect, really on par with New Moon. So it's like hard to justify. This is a Lunar Phase that gets good value when Voldus is on the field, not necessarily because of Voldus' effect, but because changing it to defense is just really strong. Of course, having the Voldus does help get more value from this card, but the pay 1 shift change position is good enough value already on the card. Lightning Crescent. This is the card that allows you to heal 2 Lunar, and then when it's discarded, you get to draw a card and discard a card. So this can also activate other discard effects from Lunar Phases, but I wouldn't recommend it. This is the best Lunar Phase if played with Voldust. So being able to cycle through your deck with Lunar Phases, this is by far the best one. Because this one is objectively better than what Voldust provides. Voldust allows you to heal 1. This one allows you to heal 2. If Self-Tsunami of Rabbit is good enough, Self-Tsunami Draw must be good. Correct. Like, the draw is just an extra cherry on top, really, for that effect. Tsunami is still in the deck because it's just good to just switch everything you have to defense and not just one guy. And it also sometimes has the added benefit of switching your opponent's stuff to defense much more consistently than Wax and Gibbous. But yes, it gets enough value by itself, and extra value you get from Voldust is just added benefit. So back onto Waning Crescent. As it's the best effect to be played when you have Voldust on field. It's pretty bad without Voldust though, because it is just objectively worse Amber at that point. Sometimes that is enough to put you just enough spirits to be able to finish out the game, but it's rare that +1 in spirits really matters in a game. Unless you're able to do this as well as proccing Voldust effects and doing this multiple times per game. It has an okay discard effect. It is an objectively worse effect than what Voldust provides, but it's not quite as bad as Full Moon. Because this one lets you cycle through your cards, and it can activate other Lunar Phases. It's not the best one, especially since it's the best Lunar Phase to be played if you have Voldust. So I would usually end up discarding something else when before I discard this one. When Amber starts to be on the chopping block, we'll 100% see more Waning Crescent. Maybe. This card is just worse Amber. Like, it's like 1 less spirit is significant enough, especially since it doesn't let you have any choice in what spirits you return as well. It's so much worse than Amber that I don't anticipate it being super common. Like I know that Coder played it in his side because, you know, it's a searchable Ambro, but I don't think it's very good without Voldust, to be honest. Waiting Gibbous. This is the Lunar Phase that allows you to return a Lunar Phase, Volumbra, or Volclips from your hand or Underworld back to your deck to search for a Voldas. This is... I highly recommend playing this alongside Voldas. That way you can go +1 in card advantage overall. So you're getting the search as well as the draw. It can be used to get Voldas for the normal cast of the turn, but it feels awful if you do not have other Lunar Phases to immediately start benefiting from that Voldas that you search, or other Voldas, or it's not triggering other Voldas on the field. Going Voldas and playing this afterwards feels really nice. Playing this, then playing your first Voldas feels really bad. It feels especially bad if it's your very first normal cast of the game, because you realistically want to dump or use a Lunar Phase to be able to actually gain value from that Lunar Phase before returning it to your deck. So it just feels really bad, and now you're down 2 Lunar Phases from your hand for that Voldas that you search. So that Voldas you search may or may not have enough Lunar Phases to really get value from, unless you somehow keep it alive from it. The return effect is actually surprisingly strong. The second chance at full moon into Like a Void does happen. More healing from waning crescents, more destructions from new moon, and then the fun thing is looping it. Waning Gibbous can return another copy of Waning Gibbous. So if you are down to a few cards left in deck, you can go Waning Gibbous, return Waning Gibbous, and now you can continue recycling those Waning Gibbuses and not deck out. Which does happen. Like, getting to a position where you can deck out is quite common, or not necessarily common, but not uncommon. So being able to make sure that you don't deck out is very good. If you have Voldas on field, then you start being able to go. You start advancing in Spirit Economy as well. At 1, you can just keep the loop going forever. At 2, you start healing 1 spirit per turn. At 3, you can heal up to 3 spirits per turn. It is hard to justify playing without Voldas or on field or in deck, so you're just using it just to return a benefits. At that point, you probably lost again. You've lost all 3 Voldas to the Underworld. And there is a card that allows you to return Voldas from your Underworld back to your hand, but chances are setting that up is too much to handle if you don't have other Voldas on the field already. And this is a card that does that. So first quarter allows you to draw a card. Then you may discard a Lunar Phase to return Voldas, Volumbra, or Volclips from your Underworld to your hand. So it's not quite as strong as Waning Crescent when paired with Voldas, because with Waning Crescent you can go +1 in Spirit Advantage and net 0 in card economy. With this card you can go net 0 in both. But you can also go +1 in card advantage, which can generally be sometimes bad. It is pretty bad without Voldas. Mainly because it is like you're spending 1 spirit to be able to cycle 1 card, and also because it's a counter. Being a counter really does hurt. It's a blessing and a curse. So the benefit to being a counter is that you can cast it during your opponent's turn without sacrificing significant utility. So instead of sacrificing your position change or your attack bonus or your enchants / ascension, you just draw a card. So there's no particular reason to hold it for a better opportunity unless you can unless you think that you could proc more Voldust effects off of it. Hurricane Bait, no. No, it's not really Hurricane Bait. I'll talk about that after I go over this one. The problem with it being a counter rune is that when you draw into it, you don't get the card off of its draw or from your Voldust until your next turn. So if you would draw a counter rune, well, you aren't going to have that until next turn, and that could mean keeping or losing your Voldust. So it's kind of a risk-reward type of thing, sorta. It's good enough that it gets enough value, but it's not one that I really think is a 3-of like a lot of people think. Adding back the secondary effect to add back a Voldust is very good, since it does not cost extra spirit. So with this discard effect, you are still going net 0 in card economy. And you are even getting more stuff off of it if you discard Lunar Phase with actually good effects. Specifically, Final Quarter, which we'll talk about next. I've set 2 before I Voldust into from this first turn Hurricane quite a few times. Fine, you go for it. The problem with using this purely as Hurricane Bait is that they're using Hurricane because they fully intend on, like, if they're playing Hurricane, right, they fully intend on actually breaking down your board. So if you're using this purely to bait out Hurricanes and only setting it without setting anything else, if your opponent doesn't play their Hurricane at that point, then you don't have anything to actually protect your Voldust. So, like, if they're doing it because they see, ooh, 1-for-4 trade, and they can't defeat your Voldust, then you just set for the next turn. So, it's not really that great as, like, Hurricane Bait specifically. Like, it does help to kind of encourage players to play their Hurricanes, but it's not really good as Hurricane Bait, if that makes sense. Because if you get the read wrong, then you still lose your Voldust. Final Quarter. So this allows you to send 2 Lunar Phases from your deck to your Underworld, and when it's discarded, you get to heal 1. This is fine to cast if to set up your Underworld for Waxing Crescent, which is the attack boost, or for Volclips. Otherwise, this effect doesn't do anything. Like, it thins your deck out, I guess, but chances are other Lunar Phases are going to get more value than Final Quarter is. So this is only really good to get those 2 specific cards easier online. I do recommend having Voldust for this one, because you can actually get some value from this after essentially doing nothing. So you actually get draws off of it, or you get a heal off of it. But it's very much a do-nothing card. However, it has the best discard effect. This discard effect is exactly the same as Voldust effect, which is better than the other 2 Lunar Phases that have discard effects. So this is actually reason why I can tolerate this card, is because of that discard effect. Being able to discard to heal 1 feels really nice. I'll be honest. Sometimes I've kind of felt like I wanted 2 copies of this, but like it not being good, if you can't discard it, feels bad. And there's only really 1 card that you discard off consistently, and that's New Moon. You rarely discard off of Waxing Gibbous, you rarely discard off of First Quarter. And then the final Lunar Phase, the Waxing Crescent. This is the one that gives Lunar Enchanted Elestral +1 attack for each Lunar Phase in all Underworlds. So if your opponent is on Full Moon, well, you can take advantage of that even though +1 is relatively insignificant. It's also the only lunar phase to cost 2 lunar to be cast. New Moon will oftentimes be more expensive than this one. Dumping final for new +4. Yeah. Yeah, final quarter off of New Moon feels really nice. So this costs 2. It's not usually going to be more... Like, New Moon is usually going to be more expensive overall, but this one is more expensive than every other lunar phase besides New Moon. It is strong when you have lunar phases on. It's very easy for this thing to give a Volus +12, +13 attack. But it also really sucks early game. Opening this feels really bad because chances are you can get maybe 2 lunar phases in Underworld before you trigger this. And +3 attack isn't super significant on a 1 attack Volus. It does not require Volus to be strong, as the cost is fair if the Underworld is set. If you compare it to things like Argo or Shield, this is valued pretty well. Being able to trigger Volus off of this is just bonus. You always want to activate this in the back step, because that way you can dodge your opponent's Argos, their shields, that kind of thing. They can't Gorgons to stop their own attack. Your Tsunamis don't do anything. Now this one does have the benefit over Don't Poke, and that it can be activated at any point, not just in the battle phase. So if your opponent does force it out with like a thunderstorm or something, and you can use this to just give your Volus +6 attack for the entire turn. And unless they have a way to out a 6/5, then their turn, they can't do anything with their battle, essentially. So it's better to be able to get the value from your opponent crashing into your Elestral than to just blank their entire battle phase, but sometimes it is forced. So back to the deck list. So why these ratios? As mentioned before, Waxing Crescent is the best lunar phase to be used for cycling with Volus. Because it's just so spirit efficient for it. Waning Gibbous is really strong in that it allows you to find your Volus, which are so important to your engine, as well as having that extra utility of returning lunar phases back to deck. That actual utility does come in handy quite often. 3 New Moon, because we do not have any other forms of removal in this list, so no Earthquake, no Laurels. And it's live enough of the time. A single final quarter because, like I said, its main effect is only really good to set up 2 other cards in the deck. And its discard effect is only really consistent when you have New Moon. So having this card only be good if you have access to 6 of the 40 cards in your deck doesn't really justify playing it more than a 2 of. First quarter is good. It's not good enough to be a 3 of. Waxing Gibbous, it's good. It's not good consistently enough to be a 3 of. Waxing Crescent, it's good, but it's not good enough or consistent enough to be a 3 of. And then Full Moon really only activates Wear Pump. Rise from the Ashes. That is an option. It is an option because you could go like New Moon, discard Waxing or Waning Crescent, discard Volclips into Rise back to Volclips. So you can dump Elestrals from your hand. You can rise back Voldust if you really need them. You can rise back a Leica Void if you have like access to your Full Moon again. So Rise could fit in this. It's just like if you want to play a little bit more aggressively, I think. Yeah, there are ways to get Voltus back, and Volclips back for that matter. I do think Rise could work, but you would have to be playing a more aggressive version than this one. This one is very, very slow. So, there is also the idea of playing like a few other variants of this list, like Tornigen, because like Wingen is like almost guaranteed to hit if you're playing 13 lunar phases. I don't think it's like I don't think it's particularly great, especially since you have to fit, like trying to fit everything in is quite difficult because you want as many lunar phases as possible, but you still have to fit in the 3 Volta, 3 Werepups, and the 3 Astrabbits alongside the 3 Wingen and Tornigen. It gets a little too tight in main deck. There's also the idea of doing Blistrix in this with Ectoplasm. Using it to get it to Volclips, yes, seems clunky. You need 4 presents or 4. I do like if you're going into Volclips, you really want to be using its effect. That way, you are either forcing some interaction or you're clearing your entire opponent's board. It feels really bad to cast Volclips and just run into shield. Feels awful. The Blistrix thing is kind of fun, because like Ectoplasm is like a additional copies of Searsword but with awful stats. The problem is that you have to be able to mill all of your lunar phases for your Volclips, and it gets really messy and a bit too gambly. Need more good lunar phases. I don't necessarily disagree. I feel like Final Quarter could really use a better effect. But I feel like there could, like, if there was more, actual Elestrals that work with the lunar phases, I think it would be better. That way you have a bit more of options, like either to play more aggressively or to support the more control-oriented playstyle more. Because like high defense is good to control the board, it's still fragile. Speaking of other builds, there's also this one. This is my first draft of lunar phases. So there's no Volclips. We are on significantly less of the lunar phases. We are on Eddy and Spectaris. So these guys were mostly there to give a better baseline game plan for the deck. That way you can play like a 5s-oriented gameplay and keep tempo with your opponent. The problem is that when you're half-assing the lunar phases, you end up with hands that, you know, you're running out Eddy, and then you're running out Eddy, and then you're running out Spect, and then, oh shit, there's too many lunar phases in my hand and I don't have Voldusk. Sometimes you just go like, okay, I found a Voldusk, now I just need a lunar phase. Okay, there's an Eddy. There's an Eddy. There's a Spectaris. There's a Rabbit. Like, it leads to long droughts of one or the other. So, it just really doesn't feel great. Like, sometimes, like, it feels great to just go, okay, I have enough cards in my hand to just get the Voldusk engine going, and then, okay, now I can start. Now I have like 3 Eddies in my hand, 2 Spectaris in my hand, a couple New Moons. I can start going aggressive now. And then like turn after turn, you're putting pressure on your opponent and they just fold to it. And then some games you're just like, okay, I'm playing out these guys, getting rid of interaction. They're on like 1 card in hand. Time to recoup my advantage. Let's go Voldusk into Lunar Phase, into Lunar Phase. Those games feel great. But those games where you just don't find what you need feel awful. So after realizing that, I just decided, fuck it, we ball. All in on the foxes. When I spin my wheels, I usually win. Let's just spin wheels. And so that's sort of where the idea for the side deck also came in that, okay, the games where I'm able to play 5s still feel good. So if I can smokescreen into playing 5s all the time, the games where 5s are better than the Lunar Phase, it should work, and it did. So this is what I would consider a control deck. When there's a few control decks, it plays super slow. Much slower than the field control. And it very much is control. Whereas like I would even argue that heal isn't really a control deck. It's still is fast enough for me to consider it a like mid-range deck, just on that slower end of mid-range. It plays that slower side because it wants your opponent to interact with you. This deck aims not necessarily for your opponent to interact with you at all. You very much want to be blanking as many turns as possible while getting advantage. And there's really 2 options that you can go about playing with this control when you have this control over the game. You can play aggro control, as I call it, where you just use your removal to just clear your opponent's field and get in for chip damage. So, like with this deck, you want to constantly have your opponent be expending resources, and so being able to start punishing them for not building up enough of a board on their side is very powerful, because they're burning themselves, and then you're also burning them. And you do this with Shield, New Moon, and Like a Void. As I mentioned, Like a Void does not take on this role as a big beater, but more so as a removal guy. As just like a guide to remove a threat on a single turn. After that, like, if it goes down, it goes down. It usually is, like, if you can keep it around as long as possible, it is more threatening than your Voldusk, so it's going to be eating a lot of resources that your Voldusk will not, which is generally a good thing. Now, if you don't consistently find these removal tools to get your opponent's Elestrals off the field, you can start switching over to bunker control. Do you think this will be a viable deck in Firestorm meta? What do you think? This deck? Personally, I don't think this deck will be Firestorm meta, or good in Firestorm at all. It gets better in the same ways that other decks get better, because you just get Champ Like a Void. The problem with Champ Like a Void is that Like a Void takes on a different role in this deck, and you really want the immunity to counterance for this deck, because it's a removal tool. It's not a beater. And also, you want to be using your Werepup's effects to search for Lunar Phases, instead of just using them as guys to deal damage. So it's not getting anything really useful in Firestorm, and Firestorm is looking to speed up the game quite significantly, with cards that are, like, a lot of cards that are able to turbo into big 6s more often. So there's going to be a lot more threats to Voldusk's 5 effects. So bunker control. This is where you play ultra defensively, and you are really just looking for your opponent to expend spirits, and you just taking trades on resources and just out-resourcing them. You really want to, like, cards like Gorgon, Tsunami, and Wax and Gibbous are very good in to be able to slow the game down and be able to blank as many turns so that you can get as much value as possible out of your Voldas. You can look to finish games or pivot to aggro control if you can develop like a Void or Volclips, or if you find like Shields and New Moons. So if you're able to start chipping away at your opponent's board, then you can start looking to be a little bit more aggressive and start getting in for chip damage. Usually if you get into Voldas, you're just going to win that game anyway, so. The Sporting Cast. So these are the cards that are not specifically Voldas or the Lunar Phase. Weirpop is the most obvious synergy besides the Foxes. It does add that extra bit of consistency so that you are able to see the lunar phases that you need to at any given point. You can grab Full Moon, that way you have the threat of Like a Void at any given point. You can grab New Moon if you need to deal with the threat immediately. You can grab Waning Crescent if you really need healing. There's options off of Weirpop. Like a Void, as mentioned before, takes on a different role than in other decks. This is a removal tool. You really want to be using its unaffected status and its relatively large attack stat to be able to deal with threats. Especially threats that are able to threaten your Voldas every single turn without any cost. Yeah. So things like Kingly or Galaxy, for instance. Those cards can be really threatening every single turn. And unlike a card like Sorlet, there's no cost tied to those cards. So they are able to use that effect every single turn and threaten your Voldas. So that's where Like a Void is best. Getting in for damage with Like a Void is also very useful because getting your opponent lower on Spirit means that they have less resources to try to break the board with. Volclips is the highest end win condition for the deck. It is game winning if you are able to attempt to resolve its effect. Because at that point in the game, your opponent should be on like 7 spirits max. And so using up a Gorgon's Gaze to stop that effect is really powerful. From there, you should be in a position where you're able to start cycling through the 8 cards left in your deck to be able to use its effect again. And your opponent only has so many gazes, so it will go through eventually. And it, like, even just being a 3-drop with a decent enough stat line is threatening enough. Astrabbit, it just has amazing synergy with the Foxes. 5 defense, helps hold the wall. It can eat your normal actions so that you can enchant to your rabbit to be able to look through your deck and be able to find lunar phases that allow you to start getting more value from your Voldas. And of course, the pseudo search of it is useful because you are able to handpick the tools that you want. So, especially when it comes down to getting the 7th or 8th lunar phase in deck for Volclips, this is quite useful for. Continuing on, Counter Rune Suite. These are the most offensive counter runes that are generic enough to be played in this deck. Being able to, like I said, this is control. You want to be bunkering up, holding the line, trying to blink as many battle phases as possible. The Shield, Gorgons, and Tsunami do the best at that. They also synergize very well with Voldas. Of course, like if you are going aggro control and trying to get in for chip damage, well, Tsunamis, Shields, and Gorgons all protect your guy from a single opponent. So a single opponent's Celestial, you can use one of the counter runes to just completely blank it. Ambrosia is the reason to keep drawing off of Bull Dust. This and Waning Crescent. Because drawing into Ambrosia is more valuable than healing one. Because if you play a Lunar Phase and heal one, you're going net 0 on Spirits. If you play your Lunar Phase, draw into Ambrosia, and play that Ambrosia, you're on +1 into Spirits. So, Ambrosia is very valuable in this, and it's also a surprisingly expensive deck. So being able to recur back spirits that you need, especially when you start early on you find Voldusk and Lunar Phases and decide to expend your Waters and Thunders for counter runes, and then you start drawing into your Ash Rapids and Tsunamis, you can start getting back spirits that you need for those. Side deck. The aggro guys, so the Eddies, Specterus, Nobbies, and the Doppelgator are swapped into any matchup where keeping tempo is important. So any faster paced decks. It doesn't... You can only side in these 10 guys, really. Like if you could dedicate more of your side deck to smoke screening into Lunar aggro, but the Lunar Phases left in deck are sufficient enough to support these guys. You don't have the Hurricanes or Zeuses, but especially if your opponent sides expecting Voldusk, the change in gameplay tempo from the smoke screen is big enough. Especially if they side into spoiled fruits for your Voldusk. If you're siding out of your Voldusk, well, now their spoiled fruits only hit 2 cards in your deck. Your Waning Crescents and your Ambrosias, which isn't as valuable as hitting your Voldusk. And generally not as valuable as if you were to have another counter. Something like Shield, for instance. So I personally, I ended up siding out the 1 Volt Clips, the 3 Voldusk, the 3 Waning Gibbuses, the 1 Final Quarter, and the 2 First Quarters to make room for the 10 guys. And then the other option we have in our side deck is Eruption. This is literally just here because of big guy matchups, and like against those big guys, your biggest hope is drawing into Eruptions and stalling the game long enough so that they're low enough to be able to finish up with the Eruptions. You can also side into the aggro guys alongside this, but chances are if they're on the really big guys like Blitztrix or the Celestial Reanimator deck, your Lunar aggro guys aren't going to be doing much. Normally I would side out the Bull Clips and the Waxing Gibbuses, because Eruption would be your win condition over your Volt Clips, and the Waxing Gibbuses probably don't change combat math at all. Let's talk a bit about matchups. So, going from easiest to hardest, well, let's just... So this is a deck that plays incredibly slow. It is able to generate enough advantage and deflect any deck that is not specifically designed to have aggressive as a main trait. So if a deck like Heal really struggles into this deck, because it has very limited options to actually break the board. So it's no surprise that Heal is the easiest matchup for this deck. The Heal matchup really wants you to be playing into them, but you don't really want to play into them. You just want to be over here sitting in the corner playing on your phone. And as mentioned, they don't really have options to be aggressive. Like, they may have Eddies, they may have Zeus's, but they may have Lavalets. But they aren't really equipped to applying enough pressure and getting to these aggressive guys consistently enough to stop you from generating a ton of advantage. And by the time you are looking to finish off the game, you have a Volclips on the field, and chances are they don't have a nap to that. This is also one of the decks that you can actually stall as a win condition. So in the tournament, actually, I played against Hunter, and he was on the Heal Pantera list. And that's a list that really wants you to be playing into their cards. They want you to be playing into the Argos. They want you to be playing into the Hydrates. That kind of thing. So I ended up in a position where I have one card in deck, which is the Waning Gibbous, and I'm able to cycle Waning Gibbuses while having 3 Voldusk on field. And it was, and like, I stalled. I had Volclips in hand, but I did actually stall until game 1 took like 40 minutes. And so by the time it got to game 2, we were playing for time. He ended up keeping a really bad hand. He had tools that allowed him to play more aggressively in his side, and he decided those in for the matchup. But he never found those tools. So I was able to just generate a whole bunch more advantage than he could. Because he could play Quackles and heal 3, but I could play a Voldusk, play a Waning Crescent, heal 3. If I have a second Voldusk, heal 4. If I have all 3, I heal 5. Play another Lunar Phase, I heal another 3. And like, his Calf Mills just didn't do much because I wasn't destroying them. So this is a deck that is very easy to beat heal with. Yes, harder against decks like Fire Nexus, or Fire Artifacts. This is a pretty even matchup. This is about in the middle of where I would say the fast and the slow mid-range decks are. Heal is slow mid-range. Like Wind Tempo or Lunar Aggro is like fast mid-range. Fire is pretty consistently in the middle, because it wants you to be playing into their Argos while also having aggressive options like Kinleos and Lavalets. It's, like I said, it's a pretty even matchup, and it really depends on if you're able to constantly keep in check the biggest threats. Threats like Kinleo, Lavalet, and any potential 6s from Stadium or Artifact. So Volcari is enchanted by a Necklace or a Necroth under Stadium. Those guys can't be threatening enough. But if you're able to blank enough battle phases and ultimately generate enough advantage, you're pretty well equipped to winning this matchup. It's also a good matchup to side into the Lunar Aggro stuff, because Lunar Aggro also has a pretty good matchup into this. Arguably a better matchup than Lunar Phases. So I did side in the Lunar Phase stuff quite often into Fire throughout the tournament, and it performed well for me. I did also take games using Lunar Phase, because it's such a different playstyle that most Fire decks are not expecting it. Continuing with the matchups, Wind Tempo, as I mentioned, this is on the faster end of mid-range decks. This is a hard matchup. Very hard. Galaxair is quite a big problem. Because it always threatens Voldusk every single turn. Without cost, without setup. And it does that threaten for every single card that they have. So if they have an Astrap on field alongside the Galaxair, that Astrap is now a threat, because that Galaxair is making it a threat. So being able to deal with galaxies is really important. Sorlet is also an issue. They generally play Eddies alongside it and Zeus's. So Wind Tempo generally has a lot more options to dealing with a 5 defense. Galaxy also happens to have a big enough stat line because our biggest guy in the main deck is Werepup. And Werepup can at best crash with Galaxy unless you have Waxing Crescent. So it's a bit rough. And then any flavor of Big Eye Turbo. You have your Cryosex or your Blistrix or your Celestial Reanimator. You just lose. There's not much you can do. I'm sorry. They just get Big Eyes out so fast, so consistently. Your New Moons are super inefficient against them. And you can only keep up the engine for so long before they'll ultimately overwhelm you. That's why we're playing the Eruptions, because at that point we're preying on being able to finish out the game at that point. It's like Cryosec, like you can maybe side into the Lunar Aggro guys, but against Blistrix or Reanimator, those guys don't do anything. Are there any suggestions for other decks that I should talk about? I don't have too much testing against decks other than these. I can sort of talk about what I think would happen from them, but I don't have like concrete experience. Give it like another minute. Okay, so no suggestions. So I'll come back to this at the end of the presentation if anybody wants to hop in for that. So summary overall. They're new. But on a more serious note, this is an incredibly fun deck. The amount of skill that you can express with this deck is really nice, especially compared to some other decks. You're able to really pinpoint how to play better, because every single turn you have a dozen different choices to make. What lunar phases you play, what order you play them in, how you decide when to go aggressive, when to bunker down, how efficient you are with each counter in use, when you go for game, how to manage that sort of thing. And like it's also really fun to just draw a dozen cards within 2 turns. And like, oh, there's more cards in my hand than there are in my deck and Underworlds combined. That's really really fun. You can also get into really interesting game states that are not common with other decks, where like the pure stall that this deck can accomplish. Like, it's not good a lot of the time. It's not good game design, really. It's just kind of funny when it does happen, and it's uncommon enough, and so it's fragile enough that it's tolerable, and it's in a deck that hasn't seen any competitive play besides right now, and probably won't see any competitive play until new support is released. Like I said, I really enjoyed this. If there was more Moonrise events, like, I really wish there were more Moonrise events. Like, there's, like, I would love to take this to another premiere. I would love to be able to take Solar Artifacts to another premiere. It's just, the game's progressing, and we have Firestorm next month, which I am not super excited about. I don't think I have any more for slides. Does anybody have any questions or any matchups that you would like me to go over regarding this? Heck, even questions about like other tournament runs I've had. If you have any specific questions about the ban list, I'll probably end up yapping a little bit more as I open up some of the product that I have. I have another box here, and some of the premiere packs in here, I think. Yeah, that's about it for the actual presentation stuff. Now then, we'll just move on to the unboxing stuff then. It'll be a little more chill, and won't be, like, this wasn't even that formal, but no more presentation, no more lecture. We'll just have fun opening up some packs. So, we have Pandora's box. So actual matchups in the tournament. Round 1, person instantly dropped from the tournament. Round 2 was just Listrix. Not much I could have done against that. Like I cited interruptions. I ended up finding one because my opponent avalanched it. So that's cool. Round 2, or round 3, let me pull up the actual tournament, that way I actually have something to look at. Because I am forgetting. It's not. Can't find it. Let me see if I can find it with Discord. on it. So round 3 of Swiss. That was the stream match, so that was against Draking. Thank you. Thank you for the compliment about the presentation. So round 3 was against Draking, that was on stream. Round 4 was against Sand Sally, shout out. She was on like a pet shop, like pseudo pet shop build. Round 5, Soren, he was on Fire Artifacts, I believe. Round 6, Shirt was also on Fire Artifacts, I think. And round 7 was also Fire Artifacts. I believe Soren was on Fire Artifacts. Yeah. Or no, it was just Fire Grid stuff, it looks like. Never mind. But like round 5, 6, and 7, I won game 1 with Lunar Phase. Lost game 2, and then won game 3 with the Lunar Aggro stuff that I sided into. Then in Top Cut, round 1 was against Hunter Surge, who was on Heal Pantera. Round 2 was against Perky, who was on Wind Tempo. I misplayed pretty bad into that stuff, but I'm not upset with being top 4. So that's how those were matchups are. Any other questions? If not, I'm gonna start opening up. So I believe in here we have Premier Packs and the top 16 carry. So this is actually my top 8 pricing from the event before this one. So this is top 4 pricing. So got a top 16 carry off. That's my second one. I still have to send out another one of these for a trade. And we have 3 Premier Packs in here. Couple card savers. So 3 Premier Packs plus a Moonrise pack. And then in the Pandora's box, we have base set, Shatterstars, Aquarius, couple Daybreak, Tournament pack, Series 2 base set, couple Frostfall, couple Moonrise, and Stellar Harvest Fall promo. Go ahead and open up the Harvest Fall. Kind of hoping for an unstacked Police or Argo, to be honest, but this is also a card I don't have, so can't complain too much. There it is. Very cool color scheme, matches with the pumpkins. Toss it into the sleeve. Okay, so let's start up with, let's go with the tournament pack into the Shatterstars into the sets in order, and then we'll do the Premier Packs last. So, turn it back. Let's see. Ash Rabbit, Bat Form, and Stellar Fairgeist. Not a bad one. That's the playset of the Stellar Fairgeist, so that's nice. This Ash Rabbit art is also quite nice. I'm indifferent to the Bat form though. Aquarius. I have not opened up much of the Zodiac Shadow Stars. So Gigas that I don't have, Carrion that I don't have, Galaxair, Windjin, Hornigen, a Hollow Windjin as a reverse hollow, and Full Art Aviolo. Too bad this card kinda stinks. Dusty's put in the sleeve. Okay, so base set. We have 2 packs of base set to go through. Possible. Island of Aeolia, Oasis Chariot Ride, Necra, Charon's Oval, Clovey, Scythe of Demeter, Spinimp, Sakurasaur, Trifernal as the rare. Olympus, Sorlet, Quackle, Bowling Apple of Discord, Atlantis, Shield of Achilles, Necklace of Harmonia, Tornado, Leonite as a hollow. Yeah, this was a promo from the indoor spots. Bit neat. Just kind of hoping for Argo or Fleets out of it, but it's semi-random at least. So, Giraflora, Frostmite, Narcoon, another Giraflora, another Frostmite. Frostfall is the set of all time. Permafrog, in this form, Verticup, and a Mostation. Lycan form, Briscoe, Helios, Gelato, Briscoe, Stuck to Forge, Rise from the Depths, Rise to the Top, and a Bufid! So that's right, bot. They have brought the Sandstorm stuff to the premiere. SMH my head. More Daybreak. Opened up enough of this already, but let's see what we do. Eddie that is not super blue, a little blue. Larvacell, Verutuka, Toxisworm, Rhynymph, Soulstocks, Caramel, and... Nope, one more. Barabok, Beargeist. One might stop it off. Guardian of the Fleece, Loom, Don't Poke the Bear, Follow the Wisp, Vitora, Javalucan, Batform, Bolzer, and Chronodile. 2-star deck. Elestrals. Onto Moonrise. I've opened up way too much of this, but not really gonna do anything else with Moonrise packs. Snowlet, Hawk, Armadon, Luxomare, First Quarter, Oystress, Electronite, Titania Strike, and Scorpio Form. Not bad hit. Tuxiri, Avocat, Dracket, Porky Wraith, Hardbud, Vandaloon, Ardvarum, Cedarsaur, and Torchin! Fuck this guy. This guy sucks. Sorry, Zero, but Torchin kinda stinky poo-poo. Final Moonrise pack, and then we'll move on to the Chrono packs. Avocat, Dracket, Porky Wraith, Artbud, Clovey, Aurora Borealis, Playing Offer, Helios' Slumber, Posthumous. Well, those were alright, I guess. 3 Premier packs. I am mostly looking for Spirits at these, actually. Spirits and Dehydrate. Because a lot of the Premier, like the Premier borders are also nice, but those are, a playset of those is 3 copies. Playset of Spirits is a lot more so. And they match nicer with the Dallas Spirits that I don't have a full playset of, so. We have a Brunalinx, and an Exaltus. The Brunalinx looks really nice. That blue is very pretty. Viscerus, and another Brunalinx. I believe that's my playset of the Viscerus. Final pack, do we get the or Hydrate? Yeah. Okay. This one ripped weird. Another Viscerus, and a Fulgarius. No Hydrate. No Spirits. Unfortunate. Yeah. Happy with the Brunalinxes. The Brunalinx is very pretty. Yeah, that's all the product I have to open. Got honestly pretty mediocre stuff out of this. I'll be honest. Nothing super exciting out of the packs. The hollows are okay. One station's probably the best one. That and the Brumix is in Viscerus. But that's gonna be the end of the stream. Thank y'all for coming out. I'll maybe do another stream like this in the future. We'll see if I top with anything interesting. But this was fun. Being able to yap about stuff is great. So thank y'all for coming by.